a guitar. There. It's yet another Matt Bellamy signature guitar on a limited run from Manson Guitar Works. Matt Bellamy's signatures are regularly churned out by Manson Guitar Works with little to no change between each series, at least on a surface level. And so in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the new Era series. Well, at least the one that I've got. It's newer? Because money. Now, one of the first things I notice about the new Era series is the slight cutaway on the back of the body near the neck part. This is something that I'm seeing more and more these days in Fenders, and in Manson, something that they're doing on their Oryx series. On a visual standpoint, the cutaway looks quite small. It's only until you get your hands on it where you can really feel the difference. From my view, it's a very subtle change, but it adds so much to the ergonomics of the guitar. And out of the guitars that I've got, it's the most comfortable to play at the higher end of the neck. Staying with the neck for a moment, the profile is a softer V with a compound radius of 12 to 16 inches. A compound radius, I believe, is something that we've only seen on the Court Mansons before and not on a full production Manson. For those of you who don't know, a compound neck is where the radius gets larger as you go further up the neck. So the further down, the smaller the radius, it's a lot more comfortable in hand, and as you go further up, that radius increases and the fretboard gets a little bit flatter. From my view, it's a very subtle change, but a very welcome one. Personally, I find that I get less issues of the fretboard fretting out and kind of muting your strings when you're bending that high up the neck. So again, for your solos, you're going to hear every single note you play, and with that cutaway on the back of the body, it's going to be a lot more fluid to reach those notes. To go over the other specifics of the neck, the material is bird's eye maple. On this particular version that I've got, it is a rosewood fretboard and it features 22 frets. Looking at the hardware, the bridge is a Goto 510A and B that's been used on a lot of the Matt Bellamy signatures for the last couple of years. The control knobs are Manson's own custom hardware that they've been using for a long time as well. Jumping over to the pickups now, the guitar is using a humbucker sized Sustainiac in the neck and a PF1 in the bridge. And this particular model has the Origin etch finish on it. The controls are a standard volume and tone setup with a 3-way toggle switch, and that tone control is also doubled up as a coil tap. What you can also probably tell from this image is that the guitar also comes with a Fuzz Factory equipped, which we will get onto a bit later on. So for those of you who've been around my channel for a while may remember that I did get a court-made Manson MB-1. The review of that guitar was actually not very favourable, and I ended up sending the guitar back to Manson. The issues around it were that the strap button just came clean off as the thread had just been completely ripped out, and the neck that they fitted was the wrong one. It was actually a lot thicker and chunky than it was really supposed to be, and I much prefer a thinner neck. Other issues around it were that the pickups were way too hot. They weren't very versatile, that you couldn't go from a nice soft clean tone and then over to something big and distorted for riffs and leads and solos and so on. So what we're going to do here is listen to the neck and the bridge pickup, and when we're on the bridge pickup we're going to flip between the coil tap as well. The coil tap only works on the bridge pickup and not the neck, as actually the neck pickup is actually secretly a single coil. My aim for these demonstrations is just to have something quite simplistic to listen to and to demonstrate the guitar with. Nothing too crazy, just something that allows you to really listen to the profile of these pickups. I'm not trying to show off my guitar skills, so I'm looking at stuff that's quite simple and rudimentary and kind of pretty easy access so that anyone playing this would actually be able to play themselves. And that goes the same for the tones that we're going to be listening to throughout the entire video. In terms of my signal chain for this demonstration, it is my MXR Timmy Overdrive with a little bit of push on the gain, nothing too crazy, it's mostly clean, and there's also a bit of delay on the end of it. It's a very standard, clean type tone. So let's just listen to what these pickups sound like. And also, I'm not going to tell you my view of this until we've reached the end of the video. So what we're going to do is just blast through all of these sounds. You can make up your own mind, and at the end I'll give you my full summed up thoughts. So I've listened to the clean tones or the kind of less driven sound. So let's remove those pedals, bring in my Boss OS2 and really kick it up a notch. So what we did with the OS2 was look at stuff that's going to be based around chord work and a good solid rhythm. And I think my OS2 is great for that sort of stuff. But let's move on and look at riffs. So let's lose the OS2 and bring in my prime distortion. So we've seen with the MXR Prime Distortion some riffs and with not very much low end, as is the characteristic of that pedal in particular. Let's lose that and bring in something that's got a lot of kind of low end to it and some grit that we haven't heard before. And then this is a combination of my Boss OS2 again and my MXR Brown Acid, which is a fuzz pedal. This is a sound that I use quite a lot in my covers and in my own time, and how it's done is going through my Boss ES8 with their own channel and therefore their own amp setup. What I can then do is put it in my Logic arrangement and pan them hard left and right respectively. I use this quite a lot for kind of riff tones and kind of to build an atmosphere, and so it's very different from the other sounds that we've listened to, mostly because there's a lot more low end to play around with, hence why you can really build something quite atmospheric. So let's listen to what that sounds like. So all the sounds that we've listened to so far are quite distinct from one another. They either have more gain as we go on or are just a different characteristic altogether. And if you've been following my channel for a while, these will be the similar sorts of sounds that you've heard throughout my covers and my sound-like videos. So really nothing that different. Looking at something that is a bit different is a built-in Fuzz Factory in the guitar, which I've never had before. So let's check it out. So hopefully with those demonstrations you've got a good solid idea of what this guitar can broadly sound like on generic tones that any guitarist would really use on them. And what I'm going to do now is give you my thoughts on the guitar itself. So let's start with the guitar and what it is. Well, what it is a signature series. And to me, what a signature series represents is the encapsulation of the artist of whoever plays that guitar. It doesn't even have to be Matt Bellamy, it could be any signature series guitar that there is. And to me what that means is it brings all the baggage of that artist and the music they play In this instance, it's Muse. To me, that whole concept is psychological and it'll range from person to person, but I would argue that no matter what, there's going to be some element of kind of the guitar being haunted by the ghost or the spirit of the artist that they're kind of representing. So when playing it, the thought I sometimes get is the only appropriate thing to play on it is Muse stuff, and that playing other band stuff is not going to be quite as appropriate or what have you. But I think that's psychological, as I'd already said before, and maybe it's just something I need to overcome. I've played 2 other Matt Bellamy signature style guitars, and both of those were caught ones. Both times when I played them, I had the same feeling that I can really only get away with playing Muse on them. But I do think that's psychological, and that I really should just look at the guitar as a guitar, and it can play anything. And it can play anything because it's a guitar. So let's look a little bit further on and look at what this guitar is physically and quite literally. Let's start with the pickups. The pickups run quite hot, which is a little bit frustrating when you want to look at the guitar and its versatility overall. When playing on clean tones, you can hear the pickups, no matter which one you're playing, start to break up. And I really can't figure out why, especially for the Sustainiac pickup. The PF1, the bridge pickup, I've had 2 before, and both of them have been in my Chaos Manson. The first one, which was the stock pickup that it came with, I put in my modified parts guitar that I kind of was experimenting with, and replaced it with the PF1 again, but with the kind of etching version in it, because I really like Origin of Symmetry, and to have a pickup with album artwork on is quite a novelty. I quite enjoy that. But I've had the ability to play now 3 PF1 pickups, and every single time and every single instance I find that they run quite hot, which is fine for when you want to do your big distorted stuff. But when you want to do something that's a bit more subtle, a bit darker, a bit softer, it kind of falls apart. Yes, it is a humbucker, so it's not as brilliant as that, but I've played humbuckers before where they play a lot better and a lot cleaner and a bit more well-rounded. So I believe that these PF1 is more geared towards big, high-octane riffs and distortions and so on, which is fine. Now let's kind of to look at playing to its strengths. The PF1 is great for riffs and good chord work and kind of building up a good wall of sound. It's absolutely fantastic for that. But for kind of your clean tones, it's not really something that you kind of really kind of reach for first instance, I would argue. Recently, at time of recording, Manson Guitar Works put out a post on their Instagram asking about the future of the pickups that they're designing, which is either do they want to voice them for more vintage stuff or voice them more like the PF1 currently. I prefer a more vintage type tone where it might be a little bit less high octane, a bit more balanced, and something that's going to sound a lot better on clean. That is just a personal view. If you like to have a guitar that's only good for distortion, great. This is brilliant for that. Honestly, it's really good. But if you want a guitar with a little bit more versatility in its kind of bass sound, this isn't so good. Sticking with the pickups for a moment, when I was putting my demonstrations together, I did incorporate the Sustainiac pickup and the coil tap just to see what that sounded like. Now, when it was on the natural kind of normal resonance, the guitar would resonate the string quite normally. But when it was engaged to the kind of harmonic setting or the higher setting, it produced this really awful kind of really high-pitched squeal that wasn't the kind of normal high-pitched squeal that you look for when engaging that particular part of the Sustainiac pickup. Now, this is the first guitar that I've used a Sustainiac system with a coil tap, and it is the coil tap that's actually done this, because there's half a pickup or less of a pickup to really kind of drive that sound, and every time I've seen a sustainer type pickup, it's being driven by a humbucker, which is, I would imagine, reinforcing why the humbucker is being used, because it just really kind of messes with that overall sound. It's a very, very minor kind of detail, but when you want to play a guitar, you want to see what its strengths and weaknesses are. You really want to push it to its extreme in all possible combinations. So if you have this guitar or you're thinking about it, be aware that the coil tap might be a bit of an issue if you're kind of new to sustainers and how they work. Something else that I want to talk about this guitar is the Fuzz Factory that I've had installed on this guitar. This is not something that appears on every single New Era series, it's an optional extra. I went for the option as I've never had a guitar with a Fuzz Factory installed, and I do have a Fuzz Factory pedal in my board. I wanted to see how different the pedal version is from having one that's installed on the guitar. The Fuzz Factory is quite a temperamental pedal, and it really shows when you're doing the whole self-oscillating aspect of the pedal, which is really well known for. The characteristic of that self-oscillation can be influenced by almost anything. The biggest player of that being the power supply that's being used, whether that's through a 9-volt battery or the power supply that you might be having on your pedal board. Other things that could affect it could be buffers in pedals before it, or in my case, buffers that exist within the Boss ES8. Whilst this pedal does live within my pedal board and is connected to the Boss ES8, I have had it, of course, on its own in isolation so I can hear what it properly sounds like, both through a combination of having it with a 9-volt and also then plugged into a power supply. When it's plugged into the ES8, that characteristic of the self-oscillation is dramatically different than what it is when it's just plugged in on its own, just between the guitar and the audio interface or the amp, whatever you want to have. The two are very much night and day, they're very different. The buffers and the power supplies that I'm using in my board really affect what the Fuzz Factory sounds like overall. And it's this difference between the pedal version and the version built into the guitar that I really wanted to explore. And for the most part, I'm pleased with it. It's quite fun to have this kind of novelty of having this Fuzz Factory inside a guitar so you can do those squeals that Matt uses for Plug-in Baby in the groove and a few other things as well. However, it doesn't really interact with the guitar so brilliantly. It's sometimes, or quite a lot of the time, or if not the entire time that I'm using it, I'm trying to fight the self-oscillation with my actual playing, because I feel that the oscillating sound of the pedal is a lot stronger than the kind of input signal that the guitar is receiving from the pickup. At the moment, I don't really know what that is. Maybe the pickup needs to be closer to the strings, but it already is quite close. When I first got the guitar, I opened up the back plate and kind of tweaked with the settings that the guitar came with in an effort to try and understand it a little bit better. Having already got a Fuzz Factory, I know what the controls do and how they really, in theory, might work with the context of playing and so on. But I still got that issue of trying to fight the Fuzz Factory to get my guitar playing to come through. And sometimes, no matter how hard I'm playing on hitting the strings, the self-oscillation sound is winning. When I've played Plug-in Baby, it really is quite difficult to get those notes to really cut through. It really comes through when I will play a string and then manipulate the stability control. And you can hear that pitch change behind the note that's being played, and not long after strumming the string, that note will die down and the oscillation of the pedal will come through in full force. This makes me really understand or really see that I am fighting the pedal itself. In some ways, it makes the circuit completely unplayable and then reserves it as just a gimmick to play Plug-in Baby with. I don't know if the version that I've got, or the guitar that I've got, is faulty, and if there is something wrong with the pedal, or if this is what Fuzz Factory has installed on a guitar from Manson, who supposedly know what they're doing, understand what they're doing, and this is, their vision, this is how Matt has it. But to me, I don't think that's the case. When you hear a live performance from Matt playing Plug-in Baby, those notes come through really well and you don't hear that oscillation. You don't hear him fighting the Fuzz Factory for a performance, which makes me think the guitar I've got is slightly faulty. Sticking with the Fuzz Factory, of course, works in harmony with the coil tap. The sound really does thin out. This is also the first guitar that I've got from Manson that does have a coil tap, and I'm really glad that I did. It really opens up the possibilities of this guitar to really kind of thin out that sound and add a little bit more versatility to its sound, which really helps considering when we've spoken about the pickups, I think they're a little bit too hot and they kind of come out too strong. So to kind of weaken the bridge pickup specifically, to give it some extra oomph really helps, and having a good overdrive sound with the core tap on really makes a sound that I really enjoy. But keeping that thin profile in mind when using the Fuzz Factory, it makes it even more difficult for your sound to come through. So if you're thinking of getting a new era series, if there are any left, you might want to think about that if you want a Fuzz Factory. These are just my views, and I don't know if the guitar I've got is atypical of what this series is supposed to be, or if the one that I've got is actually faulty, and maybe I should contact Manson to maybe get their view on it. Who knows? I feel that the things I've just said are quite negative, so let's focus on some of the positives and the things that I really like about this guitar. Let's start with the neck, which is very similar to the other two Mansons that I've already got. It's a nice, slim, soft V profile, which is so comfortable to play, and coupled that with the compound radius of the neck is absolutely wonderful to play. When you're playing lower down, it's really comfortable to just throw out chords. Higher at the neck, the radius is a lot bigger, so when you're fretting bends and so on, the notes aren't really going to be choked out, so it's an absolute dream to play. There's little to no or none at all issues around kind of frets choking out some of the strings or anything like that. It's really great to play, and for the price tag you'd really hope so too. I've played a load of guitars and kind of felt around the ergonomics of a lot of guitars, and I'm always really put off by baseball bat type necks. Ones that I kind of like think of off the back is the Ed O'Brien signature, which it features a sustainer pickup in it as well. It's the guitarist from Radiohead. He had a signature put out, and when I played one for myself, I noticed that the neck on it is a friggin' baseball bat. It's really massive. It's really chunky and not what I'm used to at all on any Fender at all. After Manson, Fender are my favourite guitar manufacturer because the profile on the necks of theirs is always quite small. So to play a Fender which had a massive neck on it was quite alarming. But if that's how Ed plays it, that's how he plays it. But to get back to my relevant point is that the neck on this one is so comfortable to play, and it's very much like my other Mansons and my Telly, notes just fly off this. The weight of the guitar is really low, so it's very comfortable to play. I could imagine just kind of having this on and playing it for hours and not really kind of facing any issues, unlike guitars like Les Pauls where they are really heavy and they'd be really uncomfortable to play after a while. With this, it's perfect, and I could just kind of play this for ages with no fatigue and no issue and just keep going. For me, being comfortable while playing a guitar is an absolute necessity, and anything that's going to kind of interrupt that enjoyment is really going to take away my want to play that guitar. And which could be a shame for some, as some guitars might sound great but be really heavy or uncomfortable to play. What I do want to talk about with this guitar finally is the pickup. Now, I've already said that the PF1 pickup in there runs really hot, and it's a good pickup for your big distortion tones. If you want to do Muse stuff, it's great. It is the pickup that Matt's using in a lot of his guitars. But for me, I like a guitar that's really quite versatile, and that means having a pickup that isn't going to run hot all the time. And if you've followed the channel for a while, you'll know that I really like a P90 tone. However, as I mentioned earlier in the video, when you're using the sustainer pickup on the higher frequency setting, that then causes some issues. So installing a P90 in this guitar is kind of out of the question if I want to keep the full capabilities of the Sustainiac in there as well. So with that in mind, I must keep a humbucker in there, and potentially maybe I'd want to replace that. But what would I want to replace that with? The only thing that I can really think of that I'd want to replace it with of a humbucker that I know that I like is the MBK2, which sadly is not in production anymore. It might not be as, quote, good at doing riffs as the PF1, but for a pickup overall and its capabilities that I am familiar with, it's in 2 of my guitars, I can't fault it. It's a fantastic pickup and I really like it. It's a lot more well-rounded than the PF1, which runs hot and is geared towards high octane stuff. So maybe in the future I'd modify this new era with an MBK2, which essentially is just a nail bomb from bare knuckle. So maybe I'll just go to bare knuckle to replace this with. That is the only major gripe that I have with this guitar, that it is geared towards really kind of heavily distorted tones, and it's not as versatile as, say, my first MA, or it doesn't really have a natural as pleasing tone on its own than my Telecaster does with its MBK1. So overall, the MB-1 New Era series, is it any good? Well, I bought one and I haven't returned it, so you decide if I think it's any good. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I've been Harry. and thanks for watching.